Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Pilates Hour. My name is Christi Idavoy, and I am filling in for Brent today. I'm so grateful and excited to be here. So today, we're talking about cueing for pathologies. And before we dive in, um, I would just like to take a moment and just reflect on how blessed we are and connect with our hearts and just take a deep breath together. And just really dropping into that frequency of gratitude, that deep, deep, deep energy of gratitude, knowing that our heart has such a massive electromagnetic field and that all of us connected through Polestar, right, connect with this energy of love and forgiveness and healing and how very blessed we are, and to send this energy out to all of the people in the world that are going through so many different things that are just impossible to even wrap our minds around, and a lot of Polestar family as well, in different parts of the world. So yeah, a deep, deep, deep feeling of gratitude to be here now with all of you. And we're going to talk about pathology today. And, at first, and some of you might know my background is in language, in philosophy and literature, and even political science. And I'm always so curious about the etymology or the root of language, of where words come from. And so, I was like, well, we're talking about pathology. It's a word that we throw around a lot, at least here in Polestar. And what does that even mean? What is it that we're talking about? And so it does have to do with dis-ease, right? With a lack of ease, a lack of well-being. And how, this is such a broad topic. And so I also want to acknowledge that it's going to be a really wide brush stroke conversation. If you do have questions, please drop them into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you just hover over it, you'll see the Q&A. We also have the chat. So feel free to drop any questions in, and I'll make sure to take some time towards the end to check that out. But we're talking about working with individuals that are experiencing, a lack of ease. So this is not the individual that is fully functioning, that is feeling really good, that is coming to us to enhance an already, healthy body. We're talking today about the individuals that might seek us out because they need help, because they don't feel at ease within themselves. And you know, I want to contextualize it too, as we're really, who are we working with? Well, for the most part, we're working with sedentary individuals, right? So like Brent will lovingly refer to us as the sagittal beast, right? The Westerner that is sedentary, that uses a desk, a car, a couch, a dining room table. And I personally had this huge epiphany a few years ago. It was quite a few years ago now, because I didn't identify as a sedentary person. And one day, it hit me. I'm trying to remember when it was. I was quite young. I was still dancing. So I was in my 20s. Um, and I realized that even though I was a professional dancer and I was a yogi and I would spend 6 to 8 hours in a dance studio, I realized I was also sedentary because I used a toilet, a Western toilet. I used a dining room table. Like my life was not on the ground. And I had had the opportunity at a young age to travel to Morocco. I got to go backpacking through Morocco, and that left a huge mark on me. It was a big before and after in my life. And realizing, and when you're in a culture where it's so normal to sit on the floor, and how much our lifestyle, our environment, really lends itself to create pathology, right? And so um when we're when we're working within this environment, and again, this is like a super broad, like, yeah, we're all sedentary. Is that the healthiest, kind of quality of life? One of my soapboxes, and I even have a sketch and a design for a toilet that I would love to one day really make that a dream come true, designing this toilet to restore the squat in the bathroom, is I find that is very, very important. And just detrimental, like really, really feel strongly about, we really should, restore the squat. How do we restore the squat? And I think that this is such a powerful question for us to hold as movement instructors, even though our client might not have that goal to want to squat. But when we understand that we're working with the bipedal human, and we understand physiology and what we're designed to do and what we would do in nature, because it really is only over what, a period of 100, maybe a little bit more than 100 years, but for centuries, right? We didn't have the conveniences that we have today, right? So it's very twofold, because also thanks to modern medicine and science, right, longevity is increased. So there's obviously benefits to everything. And so I think a very important question for us is, how do we restore the squat for everyone, even when we're working with individuals that are closer to end of life, or, are maybe even in a wheelchair, but just having the understanding and the desire to think about, what does it require? Well, we need a lot of hip mobility, right? We need the soft tissue. We need to be pliable. How do we do this? Are we really doing this when we're in our sessions with individuals? And so when we're working with people that really do have pathologies, right? Conditions, pain, right? Oftentimes these individuals are obviously uncomfortable. I mean, if anyone's ever had a little bit of pain, or your body, your shoulder isn't working well, just putting your shirt, taking on and off a sweater, a t-shirt, like so many basic things that we really need to be able to do in our everyday life, are hindered. And how does that impact our overall well-being? How does that impact how we feel about ourselves as individuals? And so the one of the key things is to create an environment where people feel safe, right? And so I know you've probably heard this before. It's something we talk about a lot at Polestar, is creating the space where people feel like they're safe to be vulnerable. They're safe to express themselves, right? And obviously, a group class is going to be different than a private. Different group classes will lend themselves to different forms of expression and all of that. But it is so important that, we reflect on, what is the tone of voice that we hold when we're working with this population? Um, you know, what is our own body language? How does it feel when the teacher is standing with their arm closed, looking down at the people on the reformer? And now do this, and now do that, right? What kind of energy, and again, it requires a lot of self-awareness first, to think about, how am I holding myself? If I bring my arms down at my sides, that's a very different stance than if I'm standing with my hands crossed, right? So how am I holding myself to create an environment where individuals feel safe? And a lot of times, I've received the feedback where students will tell me, oh, when I see you, I feel relaxed, or I'm so glad you're going to be there because I was really stressed out. And then I always ask them why. Why? Like, it's just me. Like, what? And they're like, well, because you always smile at us, or, like little things that you don't realize necessarily how powerful they are. And again, when we acknowledge that we're living in a world, I don't want to say the whole world, because I'm an optimist, and I'm co-creating my life. We all are, and I firmly believe that the vision of the world that we hold determines the state of the world that we live in, right? So like if you want to tune into what kind of thoughts you're having and how your internal world is, look at your external world, right? And it goes back to a lot of the work we did in mind setting when we had that course. But there are a lot of situations that are going on, and yes, a lot of individuals that are having a hard time. And so the power of just smiling at someone, of even if they don't smile back, even if they give you a dirty look because you smiled at them, right? It doesn't matter, right? When we are teachers or instructors, or, we're here, we're physical therapists, whatever we might be tuning into this conversation, we are here because we felt called to move into a space of healing, of creating well-being, right? So the way that we facilitate, the way that we hold ourselves, our tone, our language, right? If you give someone a cue and it didn't stick, and then you repeat it and it still didn't stick, talking louder and talking faster is not going to get you there, right? And a lot of times we do that. And I'm a mother of a young child, yeah, she's still young, right? She's only 9. And she will call me out on it, and it's like, and I notice, like, if I start to escalate and become more repetitive, which of course we have to do, it doesn't necessarily help though. And what it does is it creates more tension. It creates more dis-ease, right? A lack of ease. So if I can reflect on how am I holding myself? How am I speaking to someone? What is the texture and the quality of the way that I'm communicating with them? Is it soothing, right? A pathological situation, right, is one where there is inflammation, right? There's so many different pathologies. Today, we're not talking about pathologies in like per se. I'm not going to, I may mention a few common ones. But really the conversation is about the space where there is a lack of ease, there is a situation that is already led to disease, right? Or we know if it continues the way it's going, it's not heading in a healthy, desirable direction. So it is so powerful for us to dial back and realize that more often than not, less is more. Kindness is more powerful than that perfect cue, right? And a while back, Shelly and I did a webinar together about the one perfect cue. And obviously that doesn't exist because everything depends on context, right? But the one thing that does exist and is universal is kindness, is compassion, is realizing that if you get triggered, because it's not necessarily always easy, right? There's all kinds of triggers. We're all going through stuff. But if we can pause and stop and say, wow, I wonder what happened to that person. I wonder what led to that. What happened to them in their childhood that led to this, right? And we can step into that space of curiosity, of compassionate curiosity to say, you know what? Everyone is going through something, right? And right now, I am in this space to facilitate a positive movement experience, right? And when someone has a pathology, a disease, something going on, oftentimes movement, right? There's a lot of fear. Sometimes there's fear around dying. There's fear around not being able to provide for the family. There's fear around all of the unknown. So in the moments that we spend with them, it is so powerful to cue and narrate the things that are really obvious. Feel your body on the mat. Feel your body on the reformer. Feel the texture of the bar. Feel the resistance of the spring. Just cueing them in to that is very clear. It's very specific. It's something that they have in that moment, they have control. In that moment, they have security, they feel safe. Because again, we become the hours of what we practice, right? Life is accumulative. So we want to have so many hours of positive experiences, which is why positive thinking, right? All of these mind setting techniques are so powerful and they work. They work. It takes practice, it takes repetition. So when we're in the group class, private class, in the environment of whatever modality you're teaching, you can use cueing that is very clear and obvious of like, just notice. Notice whatever there is to notice. Textures, sounds, because all of those things, first and foremost, bring the mind into the present moment, right? Years ago, I heard a great acronym of fear: false evidence appearing real. Yeah. False evidence appearing real. Fear. That stress that is not like the real, a train is about to hit me and I should feel fear and stress to save my life. I'm not talking about that kind of stress and fear that is very helpful and healthy and thank God we're hardwired with it, right? I'm talking more of the hamster wheel of repetitive thinking, of repetitive fear, of subconscious childhood traumas, of all of the things that we don't talk about, right? That we may not even know individuals are going through when they come to us for a class. The more that we cue them into the present moment, the more we bring down inflammation, we give them tools that they walk away with, right? The minute I start to feel whatever it is that I feel that I'm moving out of my center, I notice where my pelvis is in space. I feel my feet on the ground. I relax my jaw. I come back to my body. The one thing I can always come back to and know for sure is that I'm in my body. I can feel my body. Touch your legs, touch your arms, touch your nose, grab your earlobes. Notice that your nose happens to be in between your ears. Can you sense that? Right? That kind of creating feedback and awareness for the self is incredibly healing across the board for everyone. It can take just a few minutes. And again, it's something you can start and end with and remind your people, your clients, your patients, your students. You can do that for yourself any moment of the day. You can teach this to your loved ones. You can take this home, give it to your kids. You can't lose it, right? All of these gifts that we learning how to use our inner technology we can never lose. They can't burn in a fire, right? They go on with us beyond. So the environment, the space, how you're speaking, how you're giving the information, right? Um, so something that is really, really important to keep in mind when we're talking about, when we're talking about pathology, there's often limitations that are involved, right? Something that is very coming into biomechanics now, understanding like the biomechanics of the body is really reviewing, refreshing the idea of like bone rhythms, of spirals that are moving through the body. Because again, these all, right, motion is lotion, right? We like to say, it reminds me of Jared back a long time ago. I would always hear him say, remember, motion is lotion. So movements that are where it doesn't really feel like much, like that's such a gift for individuals that are working with an uncomfortable body when they can just move and not feel so much. Sometimes we're caught up in a culture, that is still recovering from this no pain, no gain mentality. It's really, no pain, more gain. And it's very, very valuable to be able to create movement patterns that individuals can repeat on their own, that they can feel independent. They can feel like they have autonomy, right, about themselves, and that it feels good. That it's like, the way that I always would explain it to my clients is like, imagine that we're at the symphony or an orchestra, and there's a harmony that occurs between different sections of the orchestra. You know, there isn't one that's louder than the other. There's a balance, and there's harmony. Like, that's what we want in the human body. That's how we want to live, right? We want to feel comfortable and light in the body. So, creating these realities for individuals where we know that we are restoring bone rhythm, just having the appreciation and the awareness that every time I move, every time that I flex, right, my elbow, my knees, my hips, my spine, it might look, and I might, in my mind, I might even still be thinking of it two-dimensionally, right? It was like back and forth, front and back. But actually what's occurring is a spiral, is a swirl, right? Is a swirling action around the joints every time. So those repetitive, positive movement experiences are so, so, so powerful, because when we're working with pathology, what we have to do a lot of the times, most of the time, is we need to work on that paradigm. And I know you've heard Brent and all of us at Polestar talking about, this paradigm shift that we take individuals through, where being in my body or doing certain movements is equivalent to pain, or it's equivalent to fear because of past experiences that I've had. So when we can point those out for individuals, and create a movement experience that is comfortable and doesn't create pain, and then they keep doing that over and over and over again, we're creating a new paradigm for them. Suddenly, right, movement equals comfort. It might even equal pleasure. It might feel really good. It creates ease. It might give us more energy. We feel more comfortable in the body. We're going to sleep better. We're going to wake up feeling more energized, right? It's that ripple effect of the positive movement experience. And something that is a very powerful technique, because, a lot of times individuals, they might share some stuff with us. There's just so much to share, right? Even if we think about ourselves, like I went to an osteopath just a few days ago, and it's like, oh, tell me your history. And we only scratch the surface, right? In a session, there's just so little time, and so much, right? Especially when you've been observing yourself and all this life experience. But we know that we all go from sit to stand, right? So when someone's on the reformer doing footwork, you can point out to them, notice that you're going from a sitting position to a standing position. Go ahead and stand on that foot bar, right? Like, press the carriage all the way out, stand into the bar. Relax your shoulders. Allow the carriage to feel like it slides down towards your feet. Let's just stand here and take a few breaths. Notice how good it feels to stand, right? Sometimes standing is the issue. They come in and they say, I can't walk for more than 20 minutes without pain, or, right? So we can put them on the reformer and say, hey, notice that you're standing. Let's just take this in for a few breaths. Bend your knees, come back in. Notice you're going into a seated position. Press back out, standing up again. We'll do that a few times, right? And so making these associations is very, very powerful. And it interrupts the belief system that, in this example, standing equals pain. Well, we changed your orientation to gravity. You're supported on the reformer, right? Now you can stand and feel comfortable and you can hang out there. And so the nervous system starts to learn a new way to approach standing, to approach this alignment, right? Because of its new relationship to gravity, its new orientation in space. It's also a powerful thing to do to empower individuals to know, is the spring setting appropriate for you? If you press out on that reformer and what you're feeling is tons of pressure on your shoulders, well, then maybe the springs need to come down a little bit, right? It's just a little too heavy. So that when we're working with pathology, we really want to obsess around the sweet spot. Like when I work with individuals that are having serious issues, I want the entire hour that I spend with them to be spent in that sweet spot. What is the sweet spot? It's the just enough, not too much, not too little. I feel supported. I feel like I'm capable. I feel like I'm able, right? And obviously it's a journey that we go through with the clients, with the students or the patients. um, you know, First we want to enter in dialogue. We want to start changing the paradigm before we start to challenge them and make them feel uncomfortable. First, we want to not only gain their trust, um, but really allow them to start to rewrite that paradigm, right? If I'm struggling throughout life because of an injury, of whatever, X, Y, and Z, I don't want them to come to me for more struggle, right? I want them to come to me for that time, that moment in their life that is this sacred encounter with self. How can I encounter my true higher self if I'm so uncomfortable? I can, but not in the beginning. That's advanced inner work, right? That's like the shadow work, the sitting in the dark with the eyes open meditation, where all the primitive fear starts to come up. That's not where we begin with individuals, right? So first, I want to make it like just it's such a luxury, it's such a reward. I get to go and do this. And we start having some really powerful breakthroughs, right? People start feeling better. As Brent says, people that feel good do good, right? It really has an impact on society. And that is what Pilates is about, right? If we think about Joseph Pilates and his work, what's at the heart of Joseph Pilates' work is changing the world. And how do we do that? By having a critical mass that feels really good about being in their body. So we really want to be mindful of how we're cueing, how we're asking for things, what we're saying, right? Again, if I've said, reach through your leg, put your heel on the bar, put your foot on the bar, and it's not coming through, then use your hands. Come over, say this part. Let's get this part onto the bar, right? Know when to not use your hands, when to take your hands away so that there's autonomy, so that their space is being respected, right? Um, something that is very important for us to keep in mind. I mean, there's so many things, right? In terms of our principles of movement, alignment is obviously a powerful one. And beyond alignment, because alignment is actually can be even obscure in some ways, again, because we know that it's not some blueprint in a book that we're all trying to aspire to, right? That's the old school. We understand today that every individual has to find their personal sweet spot. So if my language is encouraging them to feel comfortable, to feel like can you breathe while you're there, right? That cues them in to know that they're in that sweet spot. And if we had to choose one concept that's really like an important through line, is this idea of axial elongation that I know you've heard Brent talk about so much, or the tensegrity model, right? This idea of gently everything relates to the center and then it lengthens out and away from the center. only as far as you can breathe, as it feels comfortable. Because we can try and do that, right? And it's like, when we're in a ballet class or something and we're trying to get so long that we actually start going into a back bend, right? And we miss the mark. So it's all about this place in between where it's just enough. There's just enough. And so take that concept of axial length and apply it to the entire body, thinking of the spine of the scapula. So the space that, like, your armpits are reaching away from each other as the crown of your head reaches away from your tail. Yeah. The soles of your feet are reaching away from your pelvis as your pelvis roots down and away from the top of your head, so that your cueing is, it's like we're repeating the same concept with different words depending on the different body positions, which is what I want to get into next. And so a huge part of understanding how to approach working with individuals with pathology is understanding common movement faults, which, if you've gone through the Polestar comprehensive course or any of the Polestar courses, you know that our manuals all have that section where at first we give it to you. These are the common movement faults. And then we want you to think about it and fill it out. When we understand the common movement faults, we know how to set people up to prevent what could be detrimental for a specific pathology. Okay, what does that mean? What that means is, for example, if we're working with extension contraindication, so individuals that may have stenosis, spondylolisthesis, a herniated disc, a bulging disc that has symptoms when they're going into a back bend, when they're going into extension, right? And I'm going to teach something like feet and straps, dead bugs, some hip disassociation movement, where the legs are going to be in an open chain, they're going to come off, or in a pseudo, like the feet in the straps. Well, spine extension is not part of any of those exercises. But if I know that one of the common faults is that if there isn't sufficient trunk stability awareness, what I'm going to see is movement in the lumbar spine. And I happen to be working with these individuals that need, to integrate their trunk to the movement of their extremities. Well, then I'm going to start those individuals with probably elevating their pelvis with a ball, maybe not a ball, not to start, because that's not so stable. Maybe it's a stack of blankets, a rolled up yoga mat. I'm going to basically bias their lumbar spine, for this example, into flexion, because I know that the common movement fault is lumbar extension. So in order to prevent that thing that I don't want to happen, I'm going to bias them in the opposite direction where I know that they're safe. And then I'm going to bring a lot of awareness. No, again, that very obvious cueing. Notice that you're lying on your back. What parts of your body are in contact with the mat? Keep those there. Your priority, because again, I want to put it back on them, whether it's a private or it's a massive group. I want to put it back on them because I want to empower them to know themselves. That's, in my world, that's the only reason really to do this. Yeah, the side effects of looking good, of the tight body, of all the other things, those are awesome and they're really fun. But this is my altar, right? Like, this is my religion. Like, this is how I find the deepest meaning of life, is going into the body. So guide them inward, notice where you are, and then put it back on them. This is the most important thing about what we're going to do right now, is that you keep this area this way. You feel whatever it is that you're pointing out, keep that way. And on your following breath, go ahead and do X, Y, and Z. only go as far as you can. So then I'm reinforcing what I started off by saying. And when you're working with pathology, the order of the cueing, the order of the information you're giving is crucial. Because if I get the movement going before I tell them what the priority is, there's a chance there for them to go too far and have a moment of flare up, right? So I need to tell them first, I want you to do this, be aware of this, keep this way, and then I'm going to cue the movement. It's very different than if I'm cueing in a fitness environment where pathology and injury is not part of the equation. Um, so, what do we do when we're working in a group class and we have different pathologies, or we may not know what everyone's story is. Maybe someone came in late, like all of the different things that happen in life, right? And we don't necessarily, we're not privy to all of that information. I'm going to, want to start the entire group with the version of whatever the thing is that I'm teaching that is more universal, that everyone can do. And then always give them, let them know, if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. If you're not loving this, eliminate the prop or whatever it is, right? We have to give them permission to undo the thing, especially in the group. There's the element of the peer pressure, which, we might not even be aware of. It's a subconscious thing. For some individuals, it's a very conscious thing, not wanting to do it wrong, not wanting to stick out, not wanting to not follow the rules, right? There's other individuals that are just going to do their own thing and completely disregard you, and they don't have those issues, right? And that's okay too, right? There's space for everyone. And if you teach long enough, you're going to encounter a lot of different situations. And if we start with the version that's more universal, so for example, again, if we're lying on our back, even if we had, you know, and again, let's say we don't know, because we could have someone that has a herniated disc or a bulge and their symptoms are aggravated with flexion, and we've started them with a prop under their pelvis to bias them into flexion. That's why it's so important to say, if this doesn't feel good for you, then please don't do it. You do what you need to do for yourself. I won't be offended by it, right? Take care of yourself. Um, and then that gives them the chance, and then we can notice it out of the corner of our eye and say, oh, right, that person's not comfortable in that body position, right? And so we just start to glean information by observing. And I remember the years of not that long ago, really, teaching what we would call our healthy spine classes that I know I've referred to before on these webinars, where we would even have a 24-person reformer class. So 24 different people on reformers in the same class, one teacher. And it was a healthy spine class. And the healthy spine was basically for the individuals that kind of graduated from their physical therapy. So that means that they get cleared by either the physical therapist or the acupuncturist or the pelvic floor specialist, whomever they were working with, tells them, you know what, you're ready to join these group reformer classes. So they did have some experience with the reformer already, right? It's definitely not a great environment for someone that's never been on a reformer before, and has a pathology. But when we're working with a big mixed bag of pathology, that's when cueing axial elongation and this idea of tensegrity becomes so powerful. And I saw a question about, how do you cue tensegrity? You cue opposition. So think of it as, it's like cueing the connections. So if we're doing an exercise like scooter, right? Press down into your front foot. Scooter on the reformer. It looks like the running man that's behind me. Press down into your front foot to press back into the carriage, right? So I want to cue the whole body. As you're pressing down, reach the top of your head away from your back foot, right? So think of it as like the movements are occurring in a sphere. Right, you can see images. The Lobnon method's got amazing images of bodies in a sphere. The Vitruvian man, Da Vinci's Vitruvian man in the circle, right? So in all movements that happen, we want to become aware and think about cueing how the energy of the movement is traveling through the entire body, right? So if I'm doing something through my hands, you know, where is that energy coming from? Like this idea of where is the movement coming from? And it's not just one place, right? We can explore this when we get on into our own practice, when we're observing other people moving, right? If we're doing, I don't know if anyone has any question about an exercise or a specific thing, now would be the time to drop it into the Q&A. But if I'm doing anything standing, I really hope that there's cueing happening about the floor, right? What's going on with the floor? I'm pressing down into the floor. I'm getting energy from the floor. Am I lifting up and away? If something is lifting up, something else is pressing down. So you can think about it as cueing the equal and opposite directions of energy that need to happen in order for there to be a balanced action around a joint, a balanced action around space, right? For things to be balanced, and we've been talking so much about alignment. Brent has got the Alignment World Tour this year, visiting lots of cities around the world. You know, an integral part of alignment is balance, right? If things are out of balance, they're out of alignment. Yeah. So, what does balance look like? It looks like it's even and opposite. If we think of a balance, like the Libra, the sign, right? In order for that scale to be level, to be aligned, it needs to be balanced. So when I cue tensegrity, I want to think about exploring the equal and opposite forces of energy that are traveling through the body to either have static alignment or dynamic alignment and control, right? And ultimately, that's the journey, right? Is that we want to get individuals into these areas where they are dynamically stable. They can go up and down stairs, they can go hiking, skiing, climbing, golfing, tennis, gardening, walking dogs, picking up children, all of the things of life, right? Traveling, suitcases, backpacks, getting dressed. I mean, all of our daily tasks require dynamic alignment, dynamic stability. So when we're working with individuals, again, we want to keep dialing it back to cueing the whole body. And if that feels like a lot and a little overwhelming, then just choose one part, be quiet, right? Observe based on what you see, cue something else, and also ask questions. You can ask your clients questions. Sometimes they'll have interesting answers, sometimes they won't. Sometimes I've been told, well, isn't that what I'm paying you for? Right? I've actually been told that. How am I supposed to know what I feel? Aren't you supposed to tell me what I feel? Right? These are fascinating moments where we go, okay, well, I actually, I don't know what you feel. You know, what parts of your body do you feel on the mat? And I remember this one gentleman sitting up and asking me, like, are you out of your mind? Like, I don't know. I can't even, no one's ever asked me to do that before. Right. And it was an incredible, we became very like we became friends, and he became a long time client that was with me for at least 10 years. And it was fascinating because in the beginning he thought I was just absolutely crazy to be asking him to share what he felt. And obviously, that was in a private setting, you know. I've also created group classes where part of the group class, and it's in the description, is like we're going to start sitting in a circle and sharing so that we can hear each other before we start moving. And then we're going to close in a circle where we can share. And it's a lot of what we do in the teacher training, right? But we can also organize classes for lay people this way. Consegrity, tensegrity, like tension. Tensegrity, from tension. Explain the dialogue, the sweet spot topic. So the sweet spot is that place is like when you know that your spring setting is just right. When you know that the body position is just right, because it doesn't feel like too much is going on. It's not overwhelming the nervous system, right? A lot of times when we're working with pathology, we don't want to overwhelm the nervous system. I saw someone talk about Parkinson's, right? And we know that when the system, when the organism, and I say nervous system, but it's so much more than what we know and classify as the nervous system. Especially with all of the studies around fascia and all of the information that's coming out and consciousness. But the more feedback that we can give the body, so the more support we can give the body, the more information, the more the body figures out where it is in space and it organizes itself in an optimal way, right? It's one of the reasons that we don't cue muscles for the most part, right? So what's fascinating about us as humans, and I've said this a lot, sometimes I feel like I'm really repeating myself, but maybe I'm not. We can override nature, right? Like we can hypnotize ourselves. We can put ourselves into a very deep, relaxed state. We can make ourselves hyperventilate and faint. Like, isn't that fascinating, right? Through our breath, really, we have access to so many layers of our physiology, of controlling. So we don't want to get in our own way, right? We are able to get in our own way. That's why observation is the key at first. Notice what you feel. Notice where you are in space. How much effort could you use less effort and keep it going? Right? Sometimes it's like, no, this is the effort. This is what it takes. That sweet spot is when you feel like you are so supported by the exercise, by the cue, by the spring setting. And again, we've got to give individuals information so that they can give us information back, because someone that is used to, they've normalized being uncomfortable in their body, they're like, oh yeah, I can feel it, but it's okay. I can stand it, or I can handle it. And it's like, no, that's not, we didn't come here to be able to handle being uncomfortable. We came here to figure out how to support, right, your experience today, knowing that tomorrow is going to be different than it was yesterday. Today, in the way that you can move back and forth in your sweet spot. Right. So when you're not in the sweet spot, the opposite of the sweet spot would be like you're not able to breathe through things. You're really struggling. You're holding your breath to get through something. And sometimes it's not even because there's I don't want to call it real or false or fake, right? But sometimes we hold our breath during certain movements out of a pattern. We're not even aware that we're doing it until we become aware that we're doing it. And so all it takes sometimes is to give them a little bit more support, which might mean a heavier spring most of the time. Sometimes it might mean a lighter spring, so that they can just find their breathing, they can find their flow, they can feel that kind of ease through the movement, and then we can change it and see if we can make unload the spring, which is going to, make gravity a little bit heavier, and see if they can straight away in one session change their breathing pattern around the movement. So observing individuals' breath pattern, how they're breathing, that they're breathing. And I don't mean by this to say cue the breath, because we can really overwhelm the nervous system with a lot of cueing the breath forever. Inhale, do this, exhale, do that, inhale, do this, exhale, do that. Some people, again, might thrive under those circumstances, depending on what their background is. For a lot of people, it's very overwhelming. So you want to understand what the common movement faults are, set them up in a way that's going to prevent those common movement faults from happening, whether that's by using props or just with the language that you use. How do you sequence the information that you're giving them? Right? If I'm working with someone, again, that has a lumbar spine pathology going on, and it's very important for them to stay in this optimal spine position, if I get their feet going and then after the movement starts, I tell them to watch for that, it might be too late, right? So the order that I give the information becomes even more important when we're working with pathology. Osteoporosis is something that's very, very prevalent. And it's important and unique in the sense that it doesn't have symptoms. Like, you don't feel osteoporosis, you don't feel pain, right? And so again, if you're working with a mixed class, or there's goals for these individuals, we know that if they have osteoporosis, we don't want them to load their flexed spine. For the most part, we're going to be avoiding end range movements, specifically around the spine, sometimes at the hips, and especially not loading the spine. So, and they still, as Brent would say, need to go and do their life, right? They need to go to the bathroom. They need to rotate and flex to wipe when they go to the bathroom. So how do we introduce some of these movements, again, where axial elongation becomes really, really, really important, and we cue them maybe to move a bit more from their hips, to maintain the length through their spine, to make sure that they're breathing, to having moments throughout the day where they can slow down and have that level of awareness. If you're about to catch a train and you got to go to the bathroom real quick and like hold my phone and my water bottle and my coat and my scarf and my backpack, and the train's about to leave, obviously you're just going to do the thing you need to do. And if you spend the hours of the day, like we go to the bathroom so many times a day, we do sit to stand so many times a day, can we educate them to slow down for 30 seconds and bring that awareness to what they're doing during the day? Because that's where the magic happens. That's where they really start to change their life, right? And so what we're doing in the time that we spend with them is setting them up for the way that they spend the hours of their life, right? With osteoporosis, again, sometimes we see it accompanied with forward head posture, rounded shoulders. We want them to do some extension. We can start them over of some pillows. Maybe they can't lie flat on their stomach, so we start them on bolsters. I love having like restorative yoga props in the Pilates studio because it allows us to play so much more. Like, there's just so much freedom and things that we can facilitate. Even for individuals that have extension contraindications, sometimes just lying on their stomach can be excessive extension if they've been having symptoms. Again, for those individuals, we can lie them over a prop, bias them towards flexion, and then they can move into extension without actually going into extension, right? So thinking about your common movement faults in those exercises, how can we play with the setup and the start position so that we can prevent those common movement faults? How do we use our cues, the sequencing of the information that we give them to prioritize what's really important and they need to have control of, and then cue the movement, right? And above everything, smile, be loving, be compassionate, find it within yourself, and notice that if you're really tough, it's probably definitely because you're really tough on yourself. And that's okay. Soften up a little bit, right? We can be soft and gentle and still be very strong and very firm. There is a very deep firmness and strength that comes in a gentle stillness. Yeah. So listen more than you talk, observe more, ask the questions, notice the look on people's faces, right? Take in all the information that is nonverbal to help guide you and know when to give, what to give, right? And that way you're constantly learning as well. Because especially working with individuals with pathologies, they're huge. There are teachers. They're really some of my biggest teachers. And even what led me to Polestar was working with a very young runner that had bursitis. And I was working with her, and Brent was working with her, and it was through her that I got to meet Brent. And yeah, creating an environment that feels safe is really so powerful, and pointing out the obvious makes people feel in control and calm. So yeah, thank you everyone. Pura vida, as we say in Costa Rica, pura vida, pure life, it translates literally. Stay aligned and be kind, and feel free to reach out with any questions. We love hearing from you, and it's really an honor and a blessing to get to be here and share this session with you guys. There's so much to talk about. It always feels like I said so much and nothing at all. So I hope that was helpful. And yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Polestar.